Dignāga's theory of meaning, the role of possessing horns in inference. K. Kataoka. 1. The problem. When we encounter an individual, we categorize it as a cow under the general characteristic, Snilaka. Dignāga considered this kind of cognition a form of conceptual cognition, vikalpa, sharply distinguishing it from perception, pratyeka, which apprehends particular characteristics, svalaka. Among conceptual cognitions, those that function successfully, such as inferring fire from smoke, were deemed valid inference, anumana. Dignāga included the cognition of word meaning within inference. This is because words like cow function in the same manner as evidence like smoke. Their operation is what Dignāga termed the exclusion of others. Smoke excludes non-fire, thereby leading to the understanding, inference, of fire as a general characteristic. Similarly, the word cow excludes non-cow, thereby leading to the understanding, inference, of a cow as a general characteristic. In other words, when we understand the general concept of cow from the word cow, we do not achieve this by enumerating every single cow. Rather, we grasp the general notion by understanding it negatively as not that which is not a cow. This liberates us from the intellectual burden of having to count every individual cow to recognize all cows. The apprehension of a general characteristic becomes possible through negation. The cognition of a cow, general characteristic, exclusion of non-cow. The cognition of fire, general characteristic, exclusion of non-fire. Thus, the core tenet of Apoha theory is that the cognition that is a cow is based on a negative cognition, namely, that is not what is not a cow, which is itself based on the exclusion of others. Dignāga expressed this as the cognition of itself is based on seeing the absence of another, at mantrabhavadarsanat atmantar pratyaya, or the cognition of a cow is by the cutting off of non-cow, ga pratyayo gavyavakadina. But what is the basis for the cognition this is not what is not a cow, i.e., this is not a non-cow? The exclusion of non-cow is, in other words, the exclusion of horses, etc. What is the basis for the cognition this is not a horse, etc.? Hattori, 1977, 48, posited that it is based on the observation that characteristics of a cow, such as its dewlap, are not found in horses, etc. That is, when one sees an individual with characteristics like a dewlap, horns, or a hump, horses and other non-cows do not possess these features. Consequently, one understands the individual as not a non-cow, thereby categorizing it as a cow under a general characteristic. According to Hattori's understanding, the cognition of a cow is based on the exclusion of horses, etc., and furthermore, the exclusion of horses, etc., is based on the cognition of dewlaps, etc. Cognition of a cow, exclusion of horses, etc. Cognition of dewlaps, etc. That's a cow, that's not a horse, etc., because it has a dewlap, etc. Conversely, in this interpretation, the cognitive process is such that the observation of definitive bovine traits like a dewlap, etc., serves to exclude horses, etc., and through this exclusion of horses, etc., a cow is recognized under a general characteristic. A similar understanding of Apoha theory can be found in Akamatsu, 1980. A cow is recognized by us as that which possesses as a commonality its distinctness from things that do not possess a dewlap, etc., and we use the word cow as an indicator of that distinctness as a commonality, Akamatsu, 1980, 975. The substantive content of this distinctness is distinctness from things that do not possess a dewlap, etc., or, more simply, the presence of a dewlap, etc. The presence or absence of a dewlap, etc., functions as the distinctness between cows and non-cows. Because it possesses a dewlap, etc., it is not a horse, etc., and because it is not a horse, etc., the general concept of a cow is understood. It is evident that Akamatsu's understanding of Apoha theory aligns with Hattori's. A similar understanding of Apoha theory is also found in recent works by Yoshimizu, 2011a, 2011b. Yoshimizu's interpretation of Dignāga's Apoha theory is as follows: Yoshimizu, 2011b, 235-236. The common definition of a cow, as stated by Patanjali, is that which has a dewlap, a tail, a hump, hooves, and horns. Dignāga also presupposes such a conventional definition. That is, dewlap, tail, hump, hooves, and horns are the conditions that constitute the definition of a cow. By excluding things that do not meet these conditions, the meaning of cow is ultimately determined. For example, from no horns, all horses are excluded. By having horns or not having horns, the semantic domain is demarcated, and all horses are simultaneously excluded. Similarly, by continuing the same operation with has a dewlap, has a tail, has a hump, the meaning of cow is determined. That is, by overlapping the exclusions of things that do not meet the conditions, the meaning of cow can be enclosed in a closed domain. Yoshimizu parallels this operation with the semantics of sense components, Yoshimizu 2011a, 571. For example, the sense components of boy are human, male, and non-adult. That which fulfills these three conditions is a boy. In Dignāga's terms, the overlapping of the exclusions of non-human, non-male, and adult constitutes the meaning of boy, Yoshimizu 2011a, 574. Yoshimizu's understanding of apoha theory, as seen above, shares roots with Hattori and Akamatsu's interpretations. Namely, it seeks the basis for the exclusion of non-cow animals like horses in the presence or absence of features such as dewlaps. Yoshimizu's argument can be summarized as follows. The common definition of a cow is that which has a dewlap, a tail, a hump, hooves, and horns, and Dignāga also presupposes such a definition. Dignāga exemplifies the function of the word cow as excluding horses by virtue of the fact that horns are never seen on them. By overlapping the exclusions of things that do not meet the conditions constituting the definition of a cow, the meaning of cow can be determined without presupposing a universal cowness. However, as Tanazawa, 1998, 15, n.2, expressed concern regarding Akamatsu's, 1980, 975, description, would basing apoha theory on the form, of dewlaps, etc., not undermine its very foundation? In this paper, I examine whether this understanding of apoha theory is consistent with Dignāga's own views. 2. The argument concerning possessing horns, PS v 43b. As noted in point above, Yoshimizu believes that Dignāga exemplified the function of the word cow as excluding horses by virtue of the fact that horns are never seen on them. First, we need to verify this fact. The relevant passage from Dignāga is the following. I present the Sanskrit reconstruction by Pind, 2009. Pind, 2009, A17, Tasmad Yatha Vite Dinasva Iti Bakane Se Vayadharana Tadvyavakadanyamenam, Natu Karkadin Pratikam Apahate, Napi Akaiku Gaviavartate. Tavapi Vivtianav Tabudamatamam. Tatha Katra Naya. Indeed, we find the statement because of possessing horns, it is not a horse. Furthermore, the subsequent statement reads, from the non-observation of possessing horns in a horse, there is the inference of a cow, etc., by excluding it, the horse. This certainly seems to suggest a cognitive process of inference of a cow, etc. exclusion of a horse possessing horns. What is noteworthy is the yatha, tatha construction of this entire paragraph. The passage about possessing horns is contained within yatha. That is, it is merely included within a subordinate clause as an example, and not in the main clause introduced by tatha. What did Dignāga intend with this yatha, tatha construction? Let us first examine the text of Jnanendra Buddhi's commentary, PS, for which a Sanskrit manuscript exists. Bold text indicates quotations from the PSV text. PS at V43b, Pind, 2009, 298, and 283, Pind, 2009, 300, and .545, and .547, MSB 235b104, Tasmad Yathatyati. Vitvamasvad Vyavartamanam Anavatva Gamayati. Taxia Vastasat Samanyavadibir API na Kisid Anavatva Namasnya Vastasat Pratijnanam. Yi pi te nasva gavdaya, tan API Vyatva na pratika Vyapnoti. Yi pi tadvijatya av, tan API niva pratikam apahate. Athasiye tatra yatha vipakavivta butter bhavi samanyina vijatiya tiraskarat asvo na bhati iti, anufta buddhi kvaviv to gavdiyas nikriya anava iti, tafatra Sabdo pi hi ligam. Auto gavadisabdat API gavdiv anufta budhara gavdiya ca vifti budhar bhavti. Tatra, CORR. Hattori, 1982, 213.16, Dila, Tato Pind. Therefore, just as, etc. The quality of possessing horns, being excluded from a horse, leads to the understanding of non-horseness. And this non-horseness, as a universal, has not been asserted to be real by those who uphold the reality of universals. Furthermore, those non-horses, such as cows, etc., are not individually pervaded by the quality of possessing horns. Nor does the quality of possessing horns individually exclude horses, which are of a different genus. And just as there, by generally excluding different kinds, the cognition of exclusion from the dissimilar arises, saying it is not a horse, and similarly, regarding cows, etc., which are excluded from horses, the cognition of recurrence, continuity, arises in a general form, saying it is a non-horse, so too is the logic here. For a word is also a sign, inferential mark. Therefore, from words like cow, the cognition of recurrence, continuity, arises regarding cows, etc., and the cognition of exclusion arises regarding non-cows, etc. Regarding the yatha, tatha construction, Jnanendra Buddhi, after quoting the original PSV text, so too is the logic here, comments, for a word is also a sign. The intention here must be just as possessing horns is a sign, so too is a word. This is confirmed by the subsequent PS. Jnanendra Bhuti rephrases it in the form of an inferential statement. That is, the following has been stated: pervasion, whatever is a sign, entirely by generally excluding different kinds, causes its own object to be understood. For example, possessing horns. Subject property, and now, a word is also similar. Classification of sign, the above is an essential property as a sign. The pervasion statement is whatever is a sign, entirely by generally excluding different kinds, causes its own object to be understood. The example given is the quality of possessing horns. For instance, if only horns are visible outside a window, that sign, the horns, causes its object, cows, etc., which are non-horses, to be understood, by excluding horses, which are of a different genus. This is explained in the commentary on Yatha. Nor does the quality of possessing horns individually exclude horses, which are of a different genus, and, by generally excluding different kinds, the cognition of exclusion from the dissimilar arises, saying it is not a horse constitute the cognition of exclusion. This example addresses the objection that, just as one cannot enumerate every individual cow, one cannot individually exclude every non-cow, which are enumerable, CFPS Ms. B234B6 a B235A1. The sign is exemplified as generally excluding different kinds rather than individually. On the other hand, furthermore, those non-horses, such as cows, etc., are not individually pervaded by the quality of possessing horns, and similarly, regarding cows, etc., which are excluded from horses, the cognition of recurrence arises in a general form, saying it is a non-horse constitute the cognition of recurrence. Thus, the sign of possessing horns causes its object to be understood by generally excluding different kinds. The issue here is not the understanding of a cow through the word cow, but rather the inference of cows, etc., based on the sign of possessing horns. A word functions in the same way as this possessing horns. For example, words like cow or tree. Jnanendra Bhuti mentions words like cow etc. above. In the same commentary on PSV at V43b, he supplements with the word tree to aid understanding. For that, namely, the word tree does not individually exclude other categories, namely, jars, etc., by saying it is not a jar. Rather, it excludes by the intention of what is to be excluded, through a single common characteristic. It excludes by the intention that is the cause of what is to be excluded, through a single common characteristic. The word tree, as a sign, does not individually exclude jars, etc., but excludes them in a general way. From the above, it is clear that the characterization in PSV 43b, because of generally excluding, Samanyina Nirkt, is seen in words like cow and tree in the same way as it is seen in the sign of possessing horns. This is Dignāga's intention in the Yatha, Tatha construction. Therefore, Dignāga's statements such as, because of possessing horns, it is not a horse, or from the non-observation of possessing horns in a horse, there is the inference, of a cow, etc., by excluding it, the horse, are not about the word cow, as Yoshimitsu understood, but rather about the sign of possessing horns. Just as smoke generally excludes non-fire and leads to the inference of fire, so too does possessing horns generally exclude horses and lead to the understanding of cows, etc. Fire exclusion of non-fire smoke. Cows, etc. exclusion of horses possessing horns. Regarding the word tree, which should be understood in parallel with the sign of possessing horns, what is the object of exclusion? As Jnanendra Bhuti supplements, what is to be excluded are non-trees such as jars, etc. Similarly, in the case of the word cow, it leads to the understanding of a cow by generally excluding non-cows. Needless to say, this understanding of words is consistently found in Dignāga's Apoha theory. From the above, it is clear that Yoshimitsu's 2011b 236 understanding, Dignāga exemplifies the function of the word cow as excluding horses by virtue of the fact that horns are never seen on them, is inappropriate when viewed against the original text. What Dignāga exemplified was the function of the sign of possessing horns, not the function of the word cow. Possessing horns leads to the understanding of cows, etc., by excluding horses. That the word cow functions in a similar way is Dignāga's intention in the Yatha, Tatha construction. There is no textual evidence, at least in PSV at V43b, that Dignāga thought that possessing horns played any role as a basis for the word cow to exclude non-cows.
Cows, etc. exclusion of horse, etc. possessing horn.
Cow exclusion of non-cow cow. Contrasting Yoshimitsu's understanding with my own, Yoshimitsu believed that the presence of horns, etc., served as the basis for the word cow to exclude horses, etc., and he sought the textual basis for this in PSV at V43b. However, what Dignāga exemplified using possessing horns was not the function of the word cow but the function of the sign of possessing horns. Possessing horns leads to the inference of cows, etc., by generally excluding horses. Dignāga argued that the word cow functions in a similar way. Dignāga did not state that the cognition of possessing horns played any role as a further basis for the word cow to exclude non-cows. Yoshimizu. Cognition of cow, exclusion of horses, etc. Cognition of possessing horns, etc. Cow. Kataoka, cognition of cows, etc. Exclusion of horses possessing horns. Cognition of cow, exclusion of non-cow cow. 3. Infinite regress and mutual dependence. Furthermore, that possessing horns, etc., are not the ultimate basis is also evident from the argument concerning infinite regress in PS v43a. The opponent, Madhava, criticized Apoha theory, arguing that it falls into the fallacy of infinite regress because it does not acknowledge an affirmative ultimate basis. In response, Dignāga accepts infinite regress as a positive outcome. That is, he does not acknowledge affirmative bases such as the cognition of dewlaps or the cognition of possessing horns. Similarly, Komarila pointed out that if the understanding of the meaning of cow is based on the negation of non-cow, then non-cow must be established first. However, for non-cow to be established, cow must be affirmed beforehand, thus leading to the fallacy of mutual dependence, Sloka Vartika Apola 83-84. Such criticisms would not hold if Dignāga had acknowledged dewlaps, etc., as the ultimate basis. This is because, if dewlaps, etc., were the ultimate basis, the fallacy of mutual dependence would not arise. As can be inferred from the criticisms of Madhava and Komarila, Dignāga did not presuppose the exclusion of non-cows based on dewlaps, etc. 4. Conclusion. What Dignāga exemplifies in PSV at v43b, specifically in the Yatha clause, is the function of the sign of possessing horns, not the function of the word cow. The sign of possessing horns leads to the inference of cows, etc., by generally, not individually, excluding horses, which are non-cows. Similarly, the word cow leads to the inference of a cow by generally excluding non-cows such as horses, etc. The cognition of possessing horns does not serve as a further basis for the word cow to generally exclude non-cows. Dignāga does not acknowledge affirmative ultimate bases such as the cognition of possessing horns. As can be inferred from the criticisms of Madhava and Komarila, Dignāga's Apoha theory is not based on dewlaps, etc., as the ultimate basis.